Hey everyone, welcome to our Rome session today. Jason Griffing here. Happy as always to have you with us. I am joined today by RJ Nestor, a man who's very well known in the Rome community, and excited to have RJ. For those of you who aren't familiar with his work, RJ is a business and executive coach, a musician, and a writer based in Morgantown, West Virginia. In addition to one-on-one Rome coaching, RJ is the creator of several popular Rome courses, including the Roman Way, Your Road to Rome, Powerful Task Management in Rome Research, and his most recent AP Productivity. RJ, welcome to the session. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So we're going to talk all about productivity and specifically the framework of getting things done in Rome. Very excited to jump into that. I've been a big productivity geek for many years and practiced getting things done for quite a while myself. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before we jump straight into the tactics here, I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking high level about productivity. And very timely, RJ, you had a tweet yesterday that I just loved, and this idea of people taking productivity too personally. And I think that was a great place to start today's conversation, because conversations about productivity can often lead us to feel like maybe we're not doing enough or not getting enough done. And give me your take a little bit on this idea of, again, people taking productivity a little bit too personally.
Absolutely. So I find that one of the biggest pitfalls of productivity is the negative feedback loop that occurs when you don't get something accomplished that you meant to get accomplished, and then you decide that in some way that's a reflection on you as a human being, and that you're no good, and that it's never going to be any better, and suddenly you don't want to work on anything, and it's just it spirals downhill from there. There's my dad, one of his favorite poems was Rudyard Kipling's If, which contains the line, "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same." And that's sort of where I want to be with my own attention to my tasks. Did I do it? Awesome. Cool. What's next? Did I not do it? Awesome. Cool. What's next? I don't want to get into the headspace that it is somehow a reflection on me personally, my discipline, my willpower. Instead, I want to look to my system and say, okay, what was the friction that kept me from actually taking that step? What were the hurdles that were in my way that made it the headwind, as I like to say, in addition to friction, that was blowing my face, that kept me from doing whatever it was that I wanted to do? I'll give you an example of recently, we moved my office to another place in my house. And this, I'm in actually what is an attached apartment on our house. And so I have a little kitchen over here. And so I bought, my own personal little coffee maker. And I made it so now my alarm that sounds on my phone in the morning, I cannot turn that off until I have taken a picture of the coffee maker in my office. And that's not about me trying to, be hard on myself or anything like that. It's simply the recognition that if I stay upstairs, that couch is awfully good looking over there. And those, there's all so many places I could go and just do nothing, but still be awake. And accomplish nothing. If I physically get into the space of my office, I've overcome a lot of that friction that normally starts my day. Or I shouldn't say normally, I should say could possibly start my day. If I can just get into the space, a lot of other things will take care of themselves. Right. And that's what I hope to, that's what I want to people to understand about systematizing it. I know full well that I may go lie down on the couch. Yeah. And knowing that, I don't want to leave that option open to me. I want to physically be down here and make it hard. This is sort of a James Clear Atomic Habits kind of concept. I'm making it a little harder to lie down on the couch and making it a little easier to get started in my office by being physically present there. And all of that is systematizing it for me. It's not personal. I wouldn't judge myself harshly if I went back up and were to lay down on the couch, but here I am, and it makes it a lot easier if I'm physically.
Yeah. That's great. I know getting things done, which we're going to talk about a lot here, is really about systematizing that and providing yourself with a framework that's going to maximize the likelihood that you're going to get those things done and that you're going to stay on track. No system is perfect. And I love this idea, again, of not taking it too personally. I think it applies very well, both at the tactical level, like the day-to-day level of not getting enough done, and also more at the strategic or higher level. And what I mean by that is another great point you made in that Twitter thread was this idea of building processes over time and building your framework and structure over time. you're not going to get to version 5 without going through alpha, beta, version 1, 2, 3, and 4 first. And a lot of times those early versions are going to be really ugly. So before we get in and start talking about GTD specifically, share some of your perspectives about this system and what you're going to share with us today. I always like to point out, especially for people who may be watching this, who aren't super experienced with Roam or who are intermediate and still getting started, that what you've built and what you're going to share today is not something that just materialized overnight, right?
That is for sure. I'll go all the way back at first to 2014, which is when I read Getting Things Done for the first time. And I won't go into depth except to say that I promise you that if I can implement Getting Things Done, anyone can implement Getting Things Done. The desk that's sitting in front of me right now, when I was doing the very first, over the big pass that you do at the beginning of getting things done to, get kind of clear and set up, I found a receipt in the drawer of this desk. This was 2014, just to be clear. I found a receipt from a restaurant that was dated 2001. And there was nothing about that receipt that was important. And the real kicker to that story is that I purchased the desk in 2008. So at some point, I moved a receipt from 2001 into the desk that I bought in 2008 and finally cleaned it up in 2014. So there's nothing special about me being able to implement a system to organize my productivity. I absolutely promise. So I ran GTD in Todoist for 6 years. And then I found Roam, and I'll talk about obviously the system a little bit more in detail when I show how I implemented it in Roam, but just to kind of give you an idea what the journey was. When I got to Roam, I had used Evernote, I had used Notion. At the time I was trying to build a Zettelkasten. I had just heard about that and was trying to make use of that concept. And I couldn't quite get it to do what I wanted it to do in Notion. And I won't go into that right now because that's another question of what I think Roam does beautifully. But as I started to take more notes in Roam, I had the realization that, oh my goodness, if I could get my task management system out of Todoist and into Roam and have it living here so tasks could be connected with via block reference, connected with their placement in projects and things like that, while also or in my notes or in my system or whatever, but also then be able to keep them in lists of my productivity so I don't have to go back and forth between apps to pull that off. It would be enormously powerful. And it would create that system where I could have a task sitting in a list that says next office or something, so I can do it the next time in the office, but that I can click on that task and it'll show me the entire context of what project it was in, what things I need to know about it. It's connected with that context rather than being this sort of just one task among many that it might have been when I was doing it in Todoist. So I decided that I was going to try to build my system in Roam. Now, I will say this, for those who might have tried to build from scratch, who are just learning about GTD to begin with, it helped me enormously that I had run GTD for about 6 years in Todoist prior to trying to build it in Roam, because I knew what worked for me and I knew what didn't. And that made it, I had a very clear image of what it was that I was trying to create. And I do think that's one of the things for, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but having helped some people get started with Roam, I do think one of the challenges is not being entirely clear about what it is that you want to accomplish with Roam can be very daunting when all you get is a blank page when you start every day. Once you learn how to use Roam, I think the blank page is one of the most wonderful things about it. But it's a different mindset when you're
paradigm shift.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to come to that place rather than starting there. So it helped enormously that I knew what my system was. And the holdout for me was recurring tasks, because Roam doesn't really have it certainly didn't then, it doesn't, in my opinion, really now either, have any inbuilt structure for recurring tasks. But at the time, when I first came in, I used, I created a page where I put references to upcoming dates and indented underneath those and put copied and pasted the various tasks that I needed to do. So it's very manual, but it still was only taking me 15, 20 minutes a week to prep those recurring tasks. Once templates became a thing in December, I was able to make that a little bit less manual because I could just call the template for the day of the week or the day of the month or the date of the year or whatever. Now that, and if for those of you who may use some of the extensions from David Vargas on roamjs.com, I use smart blocks and a little sprinkle of Workbench from Roam 42. And now it's almost completely automated what I do with the recurring tasks system. But all of that is to say, when I first came in, that was the sticking point. It was difficult to get that right. All the project stuff, everything like that, it was relatively easy to bring GTD in to sort of explain that. To layer then, the larger question, what is GTD? Effectively, for me, GTD is a way to produce reliable lists of the things that I need to do in certain contexts, whether that be where I am or when I'm there or who I'm with or whatever the relevant context.
Or what state of mind you're
exactly,
in,
or how much energy you have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those various things are contexts. And then you also, and of course, when being the big one, with when being next, it's the next thing that has to happen in the project. And then you have other, lists of actual tasks that need to happen within projects. I also, include lists of recurring tasks and things in that as part of that system. But functionally speaking, it's just the master list of everything that you have to do, organized by projects and by contexts and things like that.
Right.
Where GTD can get overwhelming is, and the reason I think Roam is a particularly powerful complement to GTD is that if you aren't getting work done at a fast enough pace, the lists can just grow and grow and grow. And then it becomes overwhelming. No one wants to go and look at a project list that is 785 projects long. We just stop using it. Yeah. And I think for most people, I think this is true of productivity in general, but in particular with GTD, when people decide it isn't for them is when it feels like it just becomes crushing. They don't actually want to engage with the system because they've got more things coming in the door than they have going out the door. And I didn't have that problem in a huge way when I was using Todoist, but I will say that since I've started using Roam, I now that I know, what my rhythm is and how to get the work done, in addition to just have it listed, I don't have that problem at all. Like it's things are churning through, and I just don't, that just isn't an issue anymore. And just as a quick reminder, this is from the guy who had a receipt from 2001 in his desk drawer in 2014, having bought the desk in 2008.
Yeah,
so
appreciate you sharing that.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's make this more concrete. You talked about those lists growing and trying to get stuff out the door, and let's jump in and have you share your screen and start outlining some of the ways that you do this. I know that we talked about, before we jump into some of the specific tactics, we did want to take just a few minutes and talk about some of the key constructs of getting things done and how that framework works for anyone on the call who's not entirely familiar with GTD. Now, we're not going to do a total deep dive into it, so I don't want people to think we're going to totally get lost in the theory and definitions here, but I did want to spend a few minutes talking about some of those higher level constructs so that it'll help as we get into some of the tactics. So can you start off by helping people in the audience understand what is GTD and what are some of the core concepts that this framework revolves around?
Absolutely. So I just kind of built a page here I call my task framework. This is not actually a page that I would go and do any work directly on, but it's a nice place to have a kind of high level overview of what are the logistical components of my GTD system. So what I'm calling categories here, I'm not sure that that's the term that David Allen uses, but it's all of these things are familiar things in GTD world. I have my inbox here. I have my lists of projects. I have special pages for active and archived projects where I just query the ones that are active and the ones that are archived. I don't usually visit the archive page, but if I have them, if I need them. Active projects for me is just a fail-safe to keep me from, if I happen to have forgotten to tag a next task or something to project, this helps me with that. Next actions, I'll show you in detail how that works when I'm actually doing my daily cycle, but effectively these are the things that I need to work on next when I'm in a given context, like in my office or at home or at church. I have my agenda, which is how I plan things. I pull things from my GTD backend into my what I want to do on a given day. There's the weekly review, which is a process for just going back through things. I do most of it every week, but some of it I don't do every single week. It just depends on, what parts need. I always say it's not so much that it needs to be weekly. It's just that systems need oil changes to make sure they're working correctly. And so, you have to make sure nothing's getting gummed up. You do have to check it every so often and make sure things are flowing smoothly. And then I have my little special unassigned task query, which is my absolute farthest backstop for things that I may have forgotten to tag and just left randomly somewhere. It'll catch those to-dos that are not tagged in some way, so they won't fall off my radar entirely. So, and I'm not going to dive into each of these in detail here. Just know that essentially these are the components. These are the pages that exist and that function in the system. And you'll see most of these when I kind of run through what my daily cycle looks like here in a few minutes. Context, these are the biggie, and these are the ways that my my next actions and things show up. Essentially, I divide my contexts into places that I will be, ways that I will reach out to people. Contact is sort of a vague one, but I have one in my main graph. This is a little scaled down here for emailing or calling as well. It's distinct for me from a where, because it has to do with the physical thing that I need in my hand. When is maybe next, or maybe I've delegated something, I'm waiting for something from somebody, or someday, which is a separate place where you check things down the road. And then I have my wife and my collaborator, my primary writing collaborator, because if there's something I want to talk with my wife about, I could tag just her name, like I have a page for Alicia Nestor as well, but that's distinct for me. Like this is a functional logistical, I need to talk to her about something specific that relates to a project that that we're dealing with. Project in the broad sense, not like in a hyper logistical sense, but in a things we might be doing around the house. Same thing with my writing partner. That's how I put together our agendas for when we meet. If there's anything in particular, I'll just tag it with his name so I can find it.
Got it.
The context I don't use, you mentioned these, and I know a lot of people find great value in them. Energy level, of mind stuff. I have tried in the past and they just work for me. That doesn't mean they're not great. In fact, when I'm teaching people working the courses, I absolutely include those as options, because I think that for some people they make good sense. For me, they create a layer of extra complication that just doesn't really. I never wind up looking at that particular layer. And then the other aspect that I have is just what functions in my recurring task system. I have a smart block where everything lives. I have a few things I have a workbench inbox, which is, in fact, I put out a video on YouTube a week and a half ago that actually shows this whole system and how it works and gives you all the pieces that you need. So if you want to check out that video, that kind of talks about the nitty gritty of that. For the sake of now, I'll just know that it surfaces those things that I need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly, annually, or some subset of those, and make sure that those tasks find their way in front of me at the right time. Productivity is just attention, getting your attention in the right place at the right time.
That's right.
That's what that's for.
And by the way, I'll be sure to include a link to that workbench video in the description of this video. So we'll get that included once we're done here today.
Awesome. But really, that's as far as like the logistical components of it. I'll open the whole page here. That's really all that's running here. And it isn't, it looks like, oh my gosh, there's so many contexts, but actually that's not very many contexts. And you're only using, they're mutually exclusive for the most part. When I am physically at my church office, I am not physically in my home office. Right. And so there are some things, it is probably worth noting the distinction for me between home and office. Yes, my office is in my home, but there are certain tasks that I need to be physically in my office to do, as is illustrated by my needing to, take a picture of my coffee maker to get my day started. Those are the things that I need to be physically in this space to accomplish. I tag those office. And maybe it's because I have a specific app that's only on my laptop or whatever that may be. that's how those are distinct for me.
Got it. Got it. So we're going to jump into your daily cycle here momentarily.
Great.
But before we do that, just want to sort of underscore like these categories and contexts and recurring tasks. This is, again, kind of the high level framework. And for anyone who's maybe only notionally familiar with getting things done or not familiar with it at all, to really try and distill it down into a nutshell, like it's a framework for just making sure that you're capturing everything that has to get done. And that would, I would say, fit into that top section RJ mentioned a few times as you were going through that like you've got sort of backstops in place and mechanisms built into that structure to make sure that things aren't slipping through the cracks. And I'm sure we'll see more of that as we work through the daily cycle. And then this idea of context is really just about like, we all have these lists of just so many different things that need to get done. And this idea of context can be a powerful way to help you make better, faster, more reliable decisions about what is the best thing for me to focus on right now. And again, based on some of those things might be physically where you are. There's all sorts of different contexts, and you can sort of make those your own as you practice GTD. So I'll be very curious to see in context how those, pardon the pun there, but in context, how those work for you. As
one of the things we talked about in cohort 1 of my AP productivity courses, that word context was getting real overloaded.
Yeah.
So I had to find different, it means so many different things. And like I have to figure out how to parse between what I mean. Yeah.
But let's jump into it. So I know your daily cycle is a big thing, and it'll give people more of a concrete sense for what we're talking about here. And I think, starting at the agenda, walk us through a typical day. What does this agenda look like? How does it help you, and how is it built?
Great. So let me start, because it is a cycle. There's really no one logical place to start. It loops and loops and loops. So I'm going to start at what would, again, as I said, I'm not in my main graph. I'm in a slightly scaled down graph, so it doesn't look as complicated as it possibly could. But effectively, when I'm running my daily routine here, I only have two things at the top level of the page. I have an agenda and I have a log. I'm looking to answer two questions. What do I want to do? And what am I doing? And if I can answer those two questions, then I'm going to be a lot clearer about the tasks at hand. I'm going to be a lot more likely to, one of the best pieces of productivity advice I ever heard was do one thing at a time. And it sounds obvious. But actually, I think it was your tweet this morning, Jason, that made me think about. You were saying if you set aside what you're going to do and you do it for 1 hour, it's amazing how much you can get accomplished.
Yeah,
that's the do one thing at a time mentality. It's so easy to be distracted by this or that or the other. The log, the what am I doing question, really helps you make sure that you're doing what you mean to be doing. And it doesn't mean if you are interrupted or something like that, just log whatever you've been interrupted with as well. So you can focus on that and you're doing that work. But effectively, the top level is just what am I doing, or what do I want to do, and what am I doing? So this is right now, I'm going to start by clicking this button that says set up tomorrow. So this is a smart block button here. And what it's going to do is it's going to run on the October 8th page. And it's going to set up the page for me. And it's going to set it up like this. It's going to draw in anything, I mentioned this, the recurring action smart block, anything that I need to do tomorrow that would be related to Fridays or related to, what is today? Related to 8ths of months or related to October 8th specifically or whatever. All of those things will be brought in by the smart block to that tomorrow. So I'm going to click that button. It'll roll for just a second here. And then I'll get my little note here that I'm going to go to tomorrow. I'm going to process my calendar. I'm going to review my next actions, and I'm going to review my active projects list. So I'll open this one in the sidebar and now head on over to tomorrow where that's been created. And I'll talk a little bit about my distinction here first between routine and other stuff. But as you can see, 5 things have populated here in the recurring actions daily tasks today spot. Write 1,000 words for the novel. This is a reminder to me to keep, it's a recurring task. Let me do a quick sidebar here. One of the challenges, I mentioned this in the tweet thread you were talking about yesterday, that I put up yesterday, that one of the points of friction that people encounter in day-to-day tasks is they have what I call ongoing tasks, meaning a task that is larger than one work session. And when we have those kind of tasks, it can be hard to do them because they sort of are a little too big to dive into at any one time. And so I like to convert ongoing tasks to recurring tasks. So instead of thinking of it as one large task, it's one, I'm just going to be poked by it every so often. And maybe I won't get a chance to write 1,000 words a day, and that's fine. But I have it there. I have a little note here since I'm in the new office, like I mentioned. I can process my boxes that are in here from the old place and get that organized. I have an old AOL email that I can't quite get rid of because there are a couple of things that come there. So I check that one time a week on Fridays. I do a little weekly accomplishments thing where I track back and look at the things that I've done, look at my logs for the week. And then this is a church thing. I finalized the people who are going to be doing the cantering, singing it from the lectern, from the cantor stand, and from the ambo at church on Saturday and Sunday. But all of those are populated by my recurring action smart block. That's how they come in. The rest of the way that I prepare my agenda is simply looking at my calendar to see what are the specific appointments that I have on the calendar. And then looking at my next actions to populate anything that may be there. I also have a button here that runs another smart block that'll do today's to-dos. So if I have something that is tied to this date specifically, like I said, 3 weeks ago, I wrote a little thing that said, pay the something or other bill on October 8th. That would show up in the unlinked references. This button would bring it up into there. And see it, or not unlinked, but linked references. And but there are no linked references for this day, so the today's to do isn't going to actually bring anything in. I click it, nothing will happen. So I won't actually. I'm using a thing that doesn't even have that in it. Well, there's nothing there anyway, so we're good. But so I would look at my calendar. I would bring up my Google Calendar, and I would make note of whatever appointments I had. I'm just going to make up a couple here. Maybe I'll have a coaching with Joe Smith. And I'll put that down here, and maybe then at 1 o'clock I'll have a Jane Smith will have a voice lesson, we'll say. Oops, if I could type, that'd be even better. There we go. Your fingers have to be in the right place on the keyboard.
That's right. You know that? It works, yeah, works a little better that way.
Exactly. That's a Rome tip for everybody out there. You want your hands to be in the right place on the keyboard. You get
the best stuff here on at Rome Sessions.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Now, this is neither here nor there. And the nice part about when I get to work with people with building their own systems is they may or may not wind up doing it like I do. Exactly. Concepts are where I want to help them with, not with, it has to be the specific way. I was just talking to a group of young musicians earlier today. I was a music composition major in college. And over the years, my respect for my teacher has only grown as I realized how capable he was of teaching a whole bunch of different composers, and all of them improved, but none of them came out sounding like him. And I think that's really hard in a creative world to not impose your own instincts on people. And so I make it a point in my Rome coaching, like Dr. Beal, my composition teacher, to try to help people find what their Rome rhythm is. So all I'm trying to do here is just choose the right work for myself. That I do it a specific way is not that important. That I'm choosing the work, that I'm planning specifically what it is that I want to do, that's the important part.
Right.
And so I do it. I put these down in the log because I know later I'm going to want to take all my notes and everything underneath these. So when I get to tomorrow, I'm going to indent my notes underneath those. And that way, anytime I go to Jane Smith's page, I have notes from every voice lesson that she's ever taken, and I can filter by voice lesson and find the most recent one. So it makes it really, really simple at that point. I do then, this is the step that sometimes people say, what, are you crazy? I actually block reference. I just use Control-Shift-C. It would be Command-Shift-C on a Mac. And I reference those up here into the agenda and make them to-dos as well. That then gives me a framework around which I can build the rest of my day. I say, okay, well, I'm going to have that at 11. So that means I can do some stuff at 6, and then maybe I'll do a little something different at 9. This isn't an exact science. And then maybe we'll say afternoon and evening or something like that. So now I have certain little time blocks into which I'll be able to draw the other things that I'm doing. And the other things that I'm doing are going to come from right here. They're going to come from I've now processed the calendar, so I can mark that off. They're going to come from, if I have any linked references specifically to this day, but the other place they're going to come from is my next actions. So let me, I'm going to shift click next actions, and that's going to bring up that page in my right sidebar here. So effectively, let's go ahead and pull these down. So I take these also as well. I'm going to Control Shift C or Command Shift C, bring those down into what I call my staging place here. That's where I decide what's going to happen, and then I'll close this up. I do that extra step there just so everything can be living in one place, and everything's a reference. And you'll see why I do that in a minute, because it makes it really easy to log stuff. And then all I do is I just go through each of these and I say, well, I'm probably going to be in my office at 6 o'clock. So let's look at the things I need to do next in my office. I have some just random stuff here that obviously isn't real. Project 7, I'm a bit more descriptive in my real life project descriptions than that. But let's say, okay, I need to be in my office that morning. That's something that could use a few hours of work. So I'll just block reference that in there. And now I have that. Why do I use block references for these? Because then when I click this as done, it also clicks it as done and disappears from the query. And it clicks this as done all the way back in the project. And it does, so it's like it's beautiful magic that takes care of that. Sorry, I went back a page instead of clicking undo. So then I'll say, okay, I want to do that at 6 o'clock. And then, at 9 o'clock, I'll be in my office, but I'll also, I'm at my computer as well. So I'll go ahead and do this at 9. And then let's say lunch with the family at 12 here. Just type that one in. I'll usually make it a to-do as well. I'll check it later. And then, I'll be upstairs in the house later. So I'll do whatever this is, in the afternoon. And then I'll make sure in the evening that I do my evening tasks here that come up for my staging, drag that down. And of course, I know I want to do this in the morning. I want to do this. We'll say I'll do this when I'm at the computer here in this span, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to drag everything on down in there, but largely I populate then this agenda from the things that are my recurring tasks and also the things that are coming from my next actions. So having done that, I'll click that. I mentioned I have a fail-safe. I don't check it every day because I do remember what projects are active, but when I need to, I'll check and make sure that I'm touching on each project that I consider active, so that maybe not touching on it every day, but I'm just not losing touch with, nothing's going to slip through the cracks.
Yeah, keeping it from going totally stale or
exactly.
sort of slipping out of your consciousness altogether.
Exactly. And so then when I get to the day, this is what I finished the night before. I would click all these out and get them all marked as.
So let me ask you a question here, if I can.
Sure.
I'm sorry if this interrupts your flow.
Oh no, not at all.
But
fire away.
But the stage tomorrow's agenda, going back to sort of where we started this, you clicked on a smart block, and that automatically pulled some things in. The process boxes, check AOL mail, complete weekly accomplishments. Those items there got pulled in automatically.
Yes.
Can you help me understand what's going on under the hood of that?
Absolutely.
Where did those items come from?
So those items came from my recurring actions smart block. So let's go over and I'll show you that, and then we'll bounce back here and we can continue. The recurring actions smart block is literally, and again, this is using the extension smart blocks that you can get from David Vargas on roamjs.com. And so smart blocks essentially allow you to build some commands within Roam. So rather than having to, manually put all of tomorrow's tasks in, I can set it up so that there's a set of commands in here in this smart block that say, okay, if the day of week is Friday, which is what the if day of week is 5 here, because it starts with Monday as 1, these are the 3 things that are going to show up for weekly tasks. And so they're there. And that's why they show up. And that's why it all needs to be in one big, long smart block, because literally it's just a conditional. If it happens to be a Friday, these things are going to be added. Also, if it happens to be the 8th of a month, I don't think I have any 8th of a month in there. But if it were the 8th of a month, if day of month is 8, then those things would have shown up in there too. If I had something specific for October 8th, if date of year, then it would have shown up in there as well. The thing that you're going to link to down in the video that I talked about that you're going to link to in the description, I show people the system also has running in the back end of it a workbench inbox, which allows me to create those recurring actions anywhere in my graph and then send them into that smart block. So if I have a project that like I'm working on a project, I'm like, you know what, this is something I need to do this every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I could create within that project a task that then and so it would stay there as a reference, but I can move it into the smart block as well with this inbox.
Okay.
The other component of it is that I have some system components here that allow me to build specifically daily, weekly, monthly, and annual tasks. And this is super important because the commands are, and they're not complicated, but they give you commands give you an opportunity to mess something up. And by building it with a smart block, I greatly reduce the likelihood that I'm going to mess something up. So I could be then just anywhere here. I'll just say that in Jane's voice lesson, I take this note. I could say, oh, I need to build a weekly task here, add weekly task. Oh, sorry, I have a query there that's behaving strangely. Let me just type the word add. There we go. Add weekly task. And when I do that, it's going to ask me, because I've built this, and if you download them that I include the video, it will work this way for you too. What day of the week? Let's say I need to do it on Saturdays. So that's a 6. Actually, let's say I need to do it on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So I'll say 3 and 6. And then the name of the task is do this on Wednesday and Saturday. It's going to show up there, and then I use that workbench with control semicolon to send it to the recurring action smart block. That lets it stay here as a reference, so the place where I originally took it is still noted, but it's also living inside that recurring action smart block. You'll see.
Okay, got it. So I was going to ask that when you were showing this, do you have to come in here and create these when you want to create a recurring task? And what you just showed us, that little tour that we just did there, is all for recurring tasks. And what you've constructed here using a few different components is basically an ability to create those recurring tasks from anywhere within your graph. And why is that important? Well, if you're working on a particular project and you think of something, the less you can pull yourself out of that context and the more you can stay put and just quickly type, okay, I need this recurring task, boom, boom, boom. You hit a few keys and then it's there and it's done and you can keep moving on. So I think that's really cool. I was curious how that worked. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. You got it. And that's, and you hit on exactly the reason for me taking the time to build it. And that is, there's friction involved with having to go somewhere else to put a task down. And so when the moment I encounter something that I'm like, oh, this may stop me from actually doing it, I say, okay, what system can I build that will make it so that friction will go away? And I will not, there'll be no longer any reason for me not to go ahead and do the thing that I need to do. If I can build the recurring action that I need right where I am, I don't have to go anywhere, and I can send it to where it needs to be, then all the better. That's the way it works. Yep.
Very cool. Okay. So let's go back. You were walking us through, and now you've kind of gotten through your task of staging tomorrow's agenda. You talked us through, there's a few different parts to that. So you're running that workflow first to bring those things in. You're processing your calendar, next actions, and active. What's next?
Excellent. So I've done the, what I call choose your work step. The daily cycle for me has 4 steps. Choose your work, track your work as you do it, capture your ideas, projects, etc., and then connect what you captured to your system. So effectively, I've done the choose your work now. I've let the system surface next actions to me. I've let it surface recurring actions to me, all things that I've built in the background. And although these things take a little while to explain, it literally is, it's smooth as butter. Is smooth as butter a thing? Smooth as silk. Let's say silk. It's,
it sounded good to me.
It did. It made sense, didn't it?
Run with
it. It's smooth as goat cheese. I don't know. But it's a very, it doesn't have any real friction in it at all for me. It takes a minute. Part of my course, with the cohort course that I do, is starting people with an even more scaled down version of this, partly so that they can build it into what they need, but also partly so that they just get in the rhythm of what it even is, because it just takes you, a week or two to get the feel of the flow. Once you got the flow, it is an absolute piece of cake. It doesn't. There's more food. I must be hungry. An absolute piece of cake to get it working here. So that's the choose your work aspect of it here. When I'm doing the track your work as you do it. So during the day, I open my agenda in the sidebar. I'm going to hit Control Shift O to do that here, and that opens there, and actually pin it over there each day. And then I open the log with Control O in here. And you'll notice I have this fun little icon here. It's a clock, stopwatch, and it's also a smart block. I have a time tracker smart block that lets me, okay, so I'm going to start my morning task. The reason all of these are references, I said I'd come back to why they're references. This is why. All I have to do is click it, say copy the reference, and then click this. What are you working on? It's going to show up as a block reference, and then I hit OK, and now I've got it logged and ready to roll. And what's going on in the background of that is actually dead simple. Once you know a little bit about smart blocks, it literally just puts the time there, puts a thing for an input that asks me what I'm working on, and pastes whatever I have copied, and then opens me up in the spot to do it, and creates a new time, a little clicker, so I'm ready to do the next task when the time comes. And then all this second one does is just calls the current time when I'm finished. So I'll show that again. Essentially, all I have to do. Sorry, I opened that. I went one step back too far. Oh, come on, RJ. You're making it harder than it needs to be. There. So all I have to do is just click on the reference, copy it, click on this, and hit OK. And I can do that. I could hit enter too if I wanted. And then here I am. I'm ready to do my work. My morning routine has me. This is when I do all of my processing of my inboxes. So this is a later step, a connect to the thing step. I do it in the morning because it's the time that works best for me in my biorhythms or whatever you'd want to call that. And so all of my morning stuff then is there and ready for me to. I just go right through the list for things. One of the rules that I have about inboxes. GTD talks about having one inbox effectively. Everything goes in the inbox. My rule is this: you can have as many inboxes as you want, as long as you process them all at the same time. Because if you process them all at the same time, it's still one inbox. And so Roam requires me, because I can't catch emails in Roam very effectively. Because Roam isn't great on a mobile device, I can't. If I'm out and about, it's hard for me to capture things on there. So I still use my Todoist inbox for those things. Or if I have PDFs and documents that I want to look at, I'll use my Dropbox inbox for that. I use Otter for longer ideas or something that I just want to transcribe. I'll just speak and transcribe that idea. I process my Twitter DMs. I'm the worst at remembering to look at Twitter. So like 4 or 5 days ago, I'm like, you know what, dude, you got a system, put it in the system. And so now that's one of the places that I check every morning as well. The idea simply being, as long as you have a spot that reminds you to check it, that's what matters. It doesn't matter how many different versions of an inbox you have. You can fill whatever little gap you may have in your system, as long as you're remembering to check all those places. And you make it easy to do. I can link straight to my Todoist inbox here. I won't click. You won't see it because I'm zoomed in on my Roam screen. But all of these are links that will take me right to those. I don't bother with an Otter link because I use another David Vargas extension for Otter to import my Otter notes. And then this is my inbox. I just open this in the sidebar, and I have a query here that says anything that's in the inbox or quick capture, though I rarely use quick capture. And as long as it's not done or otherwise referenced somewhere else in one of my systems within my Roam thing, then it'll show up here. So if I've tagged something inbox in the work, it'll show up here. But that's it. I'll do my morning routine. When I'm done with that, I'll click stop. I'll bounce back out to the log. And now I'll, close up whatever's here and go on to what's next on here. Click it, copy the reference, click my little stopwatch. I'm working on that, and it goes in there, and I can do the next work.
Got it.
So what that lets me do, one of the biggest points of friction I had early on was I knew the value of a log. I had seen it, I had felt it, I'd experienced it, but I couldn't get myself to do it. The friction of like, it takes me 10 seconds to get started on something in a log, but 10 seconds was too many. And so when I built this smart block, now it takes me like 2 seconds to get started on something. And the logging happens. The value I get out of logging now is reinforced by the fact that I can get each step of the log created effectively instantaneously. Now, if I want to do something that isn't listed over here, that's why I give myself the input box. I can change what this is, something else, and do that instead. I don't have to use, click over there to do that. But it's nice to be able to pre-populate that that makes it as automated as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Having that log not only then lets me, helps me perform that do one thing at a time productivity advice that I mentioned, but it also then gives me something back to refer to. If something is consistently not working well in my system, I can go back to my log and to my agendas and say, okay, where are these things gumming up? What's not working? What's not functioning? Because I actually have a record of what I did.
Yeah. I think logging is one of those things that I've struggled to get into the habit as well. But I've definitely found that particularly when I'm working on things that are more complex, so bigger projects, things that are going to take multiple working sessions, I've found that logging, the way that I frame it personally, is like writing a note to my future self. Bingo. And I've found that when it's time to come back to that project, looking back at the note that I wrote the last time I worked can dramatically decrease the amount of time that it takes me to reload that context.
Yep.
And when you can squeeze friction out of that process of reloading that context and be able to come back and get straight back into what you were doing and pick up right where you left off, that can make a really big difference in terms of your personal productivity, in my experience. So this all makes a lot of sense.
Agree. Yes, completely agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love how you're logging here. That all makes sense to me. I do want to be cognizant of time. So we're coming up on about 10 minutes left, and I want to move through. So you've got this process now for logging all of the work as you're doing it. You mentioned capturing and this idea of like quickly capturing ideas. I think this is such an important one. So you're going through your day-to-day, you're working on a given project, and all of a sudden an idea seemingly out of nowhere pops into your head, or you think of some other important task related to a different project that you want to quickly write down and not leave your flow. Talk to me a little bit about how you do your capturing throughout your day-to-day process.
I just captured them while you were describing it there. So if you were looking at my screen, I literally just wrote idea out of nowhere, tagged it inbox. Important idea, tagged it inbox. Then the next morning when I process my inbox, they're there, just waiting for me. Right. And that way they never get lost. And so now if I'm out and about, if I'm not sitting at my computer, I'll capture it in the Todoist app. And I'll, like I was talking about a moment ago, I process all of those things at the same time. I think, there's a lot of talk about, Eisenhower matrix in the world of productivity and urgent versus important. One of the biggest problems is the illusion of urgency when something comes in the door and you just do it now because you're afraid you'll forget it. And so something becomes urgent only because you're afraid you're going to forget it rather than it actually being urgent. Whereas an inbox that's reliable, that does not pull you out of flow, allows you to get that down and then you just go on as though the interruption never happened. The Roam makes this easy to the point of being absurd. Now, I know there are others who actually, I showed the workbench inbox that I use for my recurring action smart blocks. Some people use that for a GTD style inbox as well, and that's perfectly reasonable. That's fine. I just use an inbox tag because I think it's a little quicker, but it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It'll work either way. But that's literally all I do.
Yeah.
I do, you'll notice I took it indented under the spot in the log. I do, because most of my work takes place in Roam, I work directly in the log. I'll just come here and I'll tag at the top level whatever the project is or the topic or the person that I'm coaching or the whatever. They're tagged on the top level, and then I take all the notes underneath that. Because they're tagged, then I can find that information always in the right and relevant context later on. But if I ever need to just kind of go to a date and find it, it's also living right there in the log.
Yeah.
Now, if I need to do work somewhere else in another program or something, I may just link to where that needs to be. You had mentioned, you have some things you have to do in Notion. You would just link. I would link to the Notion work that I need to do. So I still have that spine. I still have that home base in Rome, but I am not. I don't have to leave to do it. But yes, as far as capturing, it's so simple as to be absurd. Genuinely,
right?
Like it doesn't take anything at all.
And that's one of the beauties of Rome's block-based architecture, right? Is that it really doesn't matter. Like you have this important idea, you're using that tag inbox, and ultimately in other pieces of software, you would need to leave that one specific area and then go to a different page that is your inbox. And in Rome, you truly can just tag it anywhere. Correct. and it'll show up. Now, the key is, like you said, it's very mechanically simple to do. But the magic here, or the key that sort of unlocks all of this, is having a process and really trusting yourself. This is one of the big things in GTD that I know David Allen talks about, is you have to trust the system. So if you start to lose trust in your inbox, or your inbox is plural, if you've got more than one, then the system starts to fall apart really quickly. And I do a similar thing. I don't use, I haven't done recurring reminders the way you have those set up in Rome, but I am a Todoist user as well. And there are certain inboxes that I know I don't need to check every day, but I have a recurring reminder every Friday. It's like, hey, I got to go through and I got to look at these things because I just need that prompt. I'm okay having the extra inbox, but I need that prompt so that I can trust myself to check that inbox. Because as soon as I lose faith in my ability to do that on a consistent basis, I'll stop putting things there, I'll stop using it, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. So I think really getting into those habits and providing yourself with those prompts to do those things on a regular basis is a really important point I wanted to underscore.
It's everything. I mean, the recurring, I showed you the mechanics of the recurring action system, but I appreciate that you underscored the value of it, because if you don't, one of the biggest mistakes we make just in life in general is we think, oh, I'm going to remember that. No, you're not. And you're not going to remember it at the right time, and you're not going to remember it in the right place, and you're not going to get it into the system, prompt yourself to look somewhere. Then you don't have to hold the mental RAM of remembering some kind of something. The system's going to tell you, and you're going to go there when you need to. The more I give over to the system, the more I trust the system, because I know I'm going to be checking the places. And this, I again want to reinforce the idea that when showing something like this takes a lot longer than doing it. It really, honest to goodness, I have my day ready in 5 or 10 minutes. If it's a really complicated day, it might take me a little longer, but it's not the system that's complicated. It's the work. I'm making sure I'm doing, that I'm planning the work in the right way. It is a great example of the stitch in time saves 9 thing, or what's the name of the guy? I don't know. Rory Vaden or how he pronounces his name, that talks about significant work. This kind of work is significant because it saves you so much time in the real work, quote unquote real. Yeah. It's all real, but it saves you so much time in your non-meta work when you have a clear idea of what it is that you're trying to do. Yeah. And recurring actions are what pull you through that process. You're not going to miss a step if every day a thing reminds you, check the Todoist inbox. And it doesn't just remind you, it gives me a link to the Todoist inbox. Yeah. All I gotta do is click the link and I'm there. And makes
it pretty easy for you. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. You mentioned the phrase meta. I know Tiago Forte has he calls it meta work. And there are lots of different terms for this, but it's like, there's this temptation that we have as human beings, and I feel this all the time, to just jump in and start doing the work. And sometimes when you're trying to do the planning work, getting everything in order, being deliberate about choosing what it is you're going to focus on that day, doing that meta work, you can feel this little bit of pull of like this urgency of like, oh, I'm wasting time right now. Like I should just be doing the work, not I'm like wasting too much time planning. And that is such a fallacy. And I have found that if I can stay in that mode of doing that regular meta work or that planning work on a daily, weekly basis, whatever cadence works for you, it can make an enormous difference in terms of your ability to stay focused and keep those, particularly those bigger, more complex projects that a lot of people give up on or stall out on the ability to keep those moving over time and stay focused over longer periods of time is almost entirely, in my mind, driven by that ability to zoom out on a regular basis and do that meta work that a lot of people just don't take the time to do.
Completely
so I
agree.
think that's a really important point. And then one other point I wanted to highlight here was one of my favorite quotes from the book, Getting Things Done, was, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but David Allen says that the human brain is good. It's built for having ideas, not for holding ideas.
Yes.
And I think that is such an important point. Like, it might be an oversimplification a little bit to say that, but ultimately the point he's trying to make is that having some sort of system like you've shown today, RJ, to capture everything and then surface it in a reliable way and allow you to, facilitate that meta work, allow you to do that planning work on a regular basis, I think is very cool. So I definitely appreciate you showing us this today.
Sure.
As we're running out of time here, I want to make sure to ask, you've got this AP productivity Roam course coming up. I know you've done several Roam courses and are very experienced with this. Tell us a little bit about what this course is really all about. Who is it for? And if anyone listening wants to get involved or learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. Well, I'll start with who it's for. I think I've encountered a lot of people who see the power of Roam and see the potential of Roam and really want to be productive in Roam, but they're afraid that they are going to lose track of their ideas or their work. They're afraid that they're going to feel anxious because there's no structure that's enforced in Roam, and so you kind of have to build it yourself, and that leads them to being overwhelmed or afraid of doing it, quote unquote, the wrong way. Those are the people that I want to be able to help. They've seen that value, they understand it, but they don't know how to go it alone. You don't have to go it alone. I have gone, and I can help you go. That's sort of that's the goal of the course. And the reason I've done it, I did the first cohort back July and August. The reason I'm doing it as a live cohort course is, and I said this to you before we were talking there. Sorry, I didn't have my screen still up. But the is I love coaching. I like the other courses that I have. I think they're great. I love. But and as I said to you before, it's fun to wake up in the morning and you sold a course and somebody's getting some value. But I like being there when somebody sees something and makes a connection that they wouldn't have seen otherwise. So that's why I love doing it. What it's for is to help you build a productivity system that is reliable and that will facilitate your productivity going forward. It's 8 weeks, and the reason it's 8 weeks is because 3 or 4 weeks to get that version 1 of the daily cycle flowing. And then once you get that going, it's going to open up the bandwidth to think about bigger pictures and the larger goals and the longer term things. We talk about that more in the final 4 weeks of the course, so that when you're done, you not only have a workable system, you not only have a little more clarity on what your goals are, but you are equipped to be able to continue to iterate on that as you're going forward. And I do, you have access to the stuff that the materials in the course and the things that we do indefinitely. But we have live sessions every week. We have live office hours every week. We have tools for you to be able to ask me when things aren't working for you, and they won't all the time. But then there's, you can come in and we can help each other find what those are, rather than you kind of having to fish around for it. The best place to go, I have you can maybe put the link in the description, but at rjn.st, which is my custom shortener, /AP productivity course. That'll take you to the page that talks about the course. There's a great test. I loved, we had some conversations in our first cohort, and I came out with a really a testimonial video that I think is not only great in terms of helping people understand what it is, but it warms my heart, because I know I was able to help them do things that they knew they wanted but couldn't quite figure out how to attain on their own. And we all, we worked together to find what those solutions were for them.
Awesome. That's great. And yes, definitely we'll make sure to get that link included in the notes below. So as we wrap up here, RJ, if anyone wants to just connect with you generally, maybe ask a follow-up question or two, or learn a little bit more about your work in general, what's the best way for them to do that?
Easiest is probably just DM me on Twitter, at RJ Nestor, Nestor. Like I said, I'm better now at checking my Twitter DMs because I have that in my
It's
system.
in your GTD framework.
It's in my
That's
framework,
right. It's in your
exactly.
process.
So I won't miss those as much as I used to, for sure. That's easiest, just because it's easiest to remember. It's literally just my name without any periods in it, after the at symbol. So they can find me there, and I'm always happy to answer any questions that folks may have, because I think that's, I want to be helpful, and I want to be encouraging. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you everybody again for tuning in today and for watching. If you haven't already, I've put up on the screen here some ways that you can connect with Roam Sessions. So number one, subscribe.roamsessions.com. If you're not already signed up for that email newsletter, be sure to do that. That'll get you reminders of upcoming sessions and additional updates about things that we're doing here at Roam Sessions. Beyond that, at Roam Sessions on Twitter is another great way to connect with me, as well as Jason at roamsessions.com. So if you've got any feedback about these sessions, any ideas for future topics, maybe you want to appear on a future session, I would love to hear from you. So please do not hesitate to reach out. RJ, thank you again for coming on. This was a ton of fun.
Great. I was so glad to be here, and I had a great time too.
All right, great.